Hello and welcome to this video tutorial for Virtual Racing School with the Audi R8 GT3. This time we're at Sebring International Raceway, a notoriously bumpy and challenging airfield circuit with a mixture of rough concrete and smoother tarmac sections. The lap I've driven is in default afternoon weather with sprint race fuel, but most of the technique is the same with a full tank also for the endurance races. As usual, I'll play the lap through first in full before then going into further analysis. Okay, so that was a 159.945. So to start things off from the list of data packs on the VRS website, we want to choose the Audi and scroll down to week 12, Sebring, where it loads the session details where we can see some lap data, a replay and the sprint fuel setup. So we're going to click on the Learn Track button, which loads the video analyzer. Which will start playing. We're going to pause it and we shall mute it. So just to summarize what we're seeing here, VRS auto-generates a list of sectors and we have various traces, steering angle, speed, brake and throttle for the whole lap, and of course some inputs down at the bottom here. So we're going to select sector 1 to start us off, which is the run from the start finish line to the braking zone for turn 1, and all you really want to do here is just hug the pit wall, get really nice and close to it, especially as you approach the bridge here, and the wall opens up even wider just as the corner entry approaches. You want to take advantage of that by aiming even wider at that point, and you can see here just how close to the wall I do actually get. Okay, so we're going to brake very shortly. We'll click on sector 2, which takes us to the braking zone for turn 1, which is going to be just as the wall starts to move out wider, which I can show you at the chase view here. And we're going to start bleeding off the brakes quite early on. It's a very, very long corner, and the corner starts off very gradually and quite early as well to carry a nice wide arc. So we'll just take it back to Cockpit View and play that through. So turning in not immediately, so on the brakes briefly before bleeding off and turning in shortly after that. But we are turning in well before the wall ends on the right hand side here. And then you're not going to apex for a while. So you just want to keep that nice wide arc, gradually get closer and closer to the inside wall to eventually culminate in the apex here, which is actually indicated by this cone in the fencing. Now I actually checked, this does exist in real life as well, and notice how my inside wheels are just over the yellow painted line as well. Probably can get even closer, but that's okay. And then so you'll notice how I'm kind of playing with the throttle just as I've fully released the brakes, just to get the car to exactly where I want it to be at the apex. So and that way I can get the best possible exit. So I actually pick up the throttle exactly as I apex here. Just play it through. Couple of bumps to watch out for on the exit, so make sure you open up that steering nice and early. And you'll notice a slight feather out of the throttle, and it takes me a while to get to full throttle as well. And the steering is really quite open at the point where I am at full throttle. And a small correction for oversteer there, actually quite a big one. You can see it here in the steering trace over that bump. So yeah, it's tricky on exit, especially when you're committing to such an early application of full throttle. That is quite early, and then you can drop some wheels into the dirt here. Just be aware of overdoing it, obviously. Heading towards the braking point now for turn 2, which fortunately you have some nice reference cones throughout the lap actually. So you want to be braking for the left-hander just after the 3 cones as we go to sector 3. So braking very hard into this one and turning in just after the final cone there, aiming for quite a late apex. So you've got a very long curb on the inside with quite an aggressive profile. And because of that, you want to try and get nice and close to it, but ideally you don't want to actually make contact with it. So I get really close to it here, but I don't actually touch it, which keeps the car nice and stable. And it's a similar situation with the right-hand curb as well. And you'll notice how I just feather out of the throttle as I pass both of these curbs. So we'll just play it through from cockpit view. So just being quite measured with the throttle as well, focusing on my line. And then into the entry of turn 5, we do actually reach full throttle quite briefly, and we've got the car positioned quite far over to the right hand side. So we'll take it into sector 4. So a very brief braking zone into here, and we're quite near the edge of the circuit, and we want to just spend a good amount of time bringing the car back to the inside, being very patient with the throttle. So progressively tightening the car up. The car is slowing down very gradually before hooking up to a very late apex. So we'll just play it through from chase view. You can see I'm getting closer and closer before eventually apexing just about here. So quite late. And you don't want to touch this curb. Again, this whole sequence has very aggressive curbs. You want to stay as close to them as possible, but avoid actually making contact with them. And then you're quite traction limited on the exit of the corner, so it takes me a long time before I actually reach full throttle on the exit. And just anticipate some oversteer as well, and ideally keep it within the exit curb here, because there's a nasty bump at the end of it which you want to try and avoid if possible. And then through the sweeping right of Big Bend, easily flat out. It's not really a corner. Just hug the inside, approaching the hairpin where your braking zone is going to be, again provided by these cones on the left hand side. So you're going to be braking just about at the 4 cones. So I'll take it through to sector 5 for this. So this is the hardest braking zone on the whole circuit. Braking very hard in a straight line and not turning in until we've passed the final cone at the end. And then we're progressively turning in harder and harder and progressively bleeding off the brakes more and more before hooking up all the way down to first gear as well, by the way, with a lot of steering lock at the apex to rotate the car on the spot, basically get the car rotated. Very little speed being carried at this point, up onto the curb here. And then on the exit, obviously we're very heavily traction limited, so it takes me a good amount of time to carefully get to full throttle before I've got the car nice and straight. Once you've got the car nice and straight, you want to just run over this curb on the left hand side, just a straight line it as much as possible, and you should be able to maintain full throttle even before you upshift into second gear there. So we'll take it through to sector 6, where through here you just want to hug the inside curbs on the right, on the left, keep the steering angle to an absolute minimum, barely turning the wheel through here just to keep the scrubbing of speed down to a minimum before then setting up your line before braking into the right-hander of turn 10 Cunningham, where once again you've got some cone markers which you can use as a reference. So we want to be braking just after the 4 cones here, braking quite hard, turning in quite late. Now on the entry here, you'll turn in just after the final cone there. You tend to have a lot of understeer here, so you'll notice how I just hold the brakes on quite a lot compared to other corners on the entry, just to keep the front end loaded up and avoid the chance of overshooting. So you want to hook up with this apex curb, again get nice and close to it but don't touch it, pick up the throttle as you apex, and you'll notice how traction limited I am on the exit, because I pick up the throttle quickly to about 40-50%, so I'm right on the edge of traction immediately and keep the rotation in the car, but it takes me a long time to actually reach full throttle. So we just play that through, still not at full throttle, straighten the car up, now we're at full throttle. And then the left-hander should be easily flat out, just pay attention to your line, because if you get your line wrong, it makes it a much more difficult corner than it needs to be. So both these curbs here on the left-hand side, get close to the first one, get close to the second one, and then aim for this curb just here on the right, but don't actually get too close to it. So you can change your aiming to this tower here, and I leave about a car's width there to the curb on the right hand side, which just gives me a straighter line under braking into the right hander. Otherwise my braking line would be even more of a diagonal. So we'll just take it through to sector 9 now. Now despite us opening up the corner a little bit, we're still having to brake whilst turning. If we brake in a completely straight line here, we'll end up off the track by the time we reach the corner entry. So because of that, we can't afford to brake too aggressively, and we want to brake well before the 3 cones on the left hand side. So a relatively early braking zone, just so you don't upset the balance of the car. So on the entry we reach the edge of the track before turning in and bleeding off. Don't try to take too much speed through the apex here, and your goal should be to again get as close as possible to the inside curb and pick up the throttle as you apex. Slightly traction limited there before straightening the wheel and reaching full throttle before I actually reach the exit curb. You can afford to drop some wheels off here, but it's better if you avoid doing so. So the run up through Bishop now, easily flat out, just focus on your line. You spot this curve on the left, run over that, and then spot the second curve on the left, run over that. And then approaching the braking zone into the fast S's before the back straight. So we get a sector 10, which takes us to the braking zone for turn 15. Quite a high speed right hander where you're going to be braking fairly early, just before the 3 cones on the left hand side. And you don't really want to commit to turning in fully until you pass that final cone. So I do just start to wander towards the middle of the track, but I don't really fully commit to the corner until I'm after the final cone there, where I'm just still holding the brakes on, keeping the front end loaded up, and picking up with the inside curb nicely there in the middle. Could probably actually have used a touch more curb. The only risk you run is dropping some wheels inside of that curb where you've got a very sharp edge, and that situation carries on actually through the next right hander. Just take it back to cockpit view. You notice I'm very measured with the throttle as I come off this apex, so that I don't slide too wide here, and I have room to take the left hander, where I do actually reach full throttle there briefly, up onto this curb again on the inside, but yeah, not dropping any wheels past the inside edge. And then as you set up for the final right hander of Le Mans, which we'll go to sector 11 for, you'll notice how I'm aimed completely off the marked out track boundary, so you can use this without penalty, and my actual braking zone for the right hander is completely off track here. So all 4 wheels off the circuit through the right hander, and then I turn in just a touch too early, which means I do actually drop some wheels inside this curb here. Unfortunately, I get away with it. The car is stable enough that it can handle it, and I reach full throttle just before I reach this exit curb, which you can allow the car to run out onto, open up the steering for the best possible exit. We'll just speed it up now to the run into the final corner. Keep the car over to the left hand side of the circuit. Now for this final corner you want to start turning in whilst flat out. So you see I just start to jink to the right there before I've even hit the brakes. And that's just as I pass the 3 cones on the left. Takes us to the final sector, which is going to be just after the 2 cones. Braking whilst turning, of course, so you can't brake too hard. And it's a very, very long corner, so allow the car to run out wide whilst braking. Very difficult to see this line, but it's the edge of the track, well inside these cones on the left hand side. And then just keep slowing the car down gradually, keep teasing it in, and your apex is going to be this inside wall here. So that's quite nice, right up next to the wall. You don't have to get that close, but if you can, then that's great. And ideally you want to pick up the throttle as you hit this apex. Now there's going to be another apex point on the exit whilst we're on power, so just open the steering up. You'll notice how from the moment I hit the throttle, I'm trying quite hard to open up the steering and straighten the wheel, and I actually play with the wheel here on the exit as well, just to catch some mild oversteer over the bumps. So there's a second apex point here, which has got this cone as well. Get close to that, and then you should be at full throttle at that point. Open the car up, use all of the circuit over the white line there to finish off the lap. You can find all qualifying and race setups, replays and telemetry over at virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-on-one tuition with myself and top drivers from the likes of Commander SimSport. Good luck, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.